edition of the Mindset Game podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian, online training and nutrition coach, and owner of James Robert Fitness. You can find more of my content by going to my website, fitamputee.co.uk. But before we get started with today's show, first off, let me take this opportunity to welcome back the regular listeners. And if this is your first time listening to the show, I hope you enjoy this episode and decide to subscribe to the show. And on today's show, I've got Pollyanna Hale, mompreneur, inspiring moms nationwide to lose weight, author of Eat, Drink and Be Slim, How to Eat Normally and Stay Slim. So welcome onto the show, Pollyanna.
Hi James, thank you for having me on.
So before we delve into today's topic, Pollyanna, can you talk to us about what was kind of your inspiration behind wanting to get into the fitness industry, first of all?
Well, my background is actually performing. Years ago, I was at stage school, so I was obviously really fit. I was exercising every day. We were taught how to eat well. So it's always kind of been a part of my life. I've always been sporty, and it's always just kind of been a natural part of my life. And I've always been passionate about food as well. I've got a dad who's a chef, and it's always been an interest. But it wasn't until I became a mum when I suddenly realised that actually all the things that I wanted to do and I was passionate about, suddenly there was no room in my life for them. I didn't have time to exercise. I didn't have childcare to go out to the gym or to go out to classes. Even meeting a friend for a coffee was just nigh on impossible, and meals suddenly they went from being something that I enjoyed cooking, and I still enjoy cooking to a degree, but it was more about, okay, what can I make in the shortest time possible that's still vaguely healthy, and it was just basically about trying to fit in everything into what was now. I just had so much less time than I had before, and I realized that there was other women out there, other mums out there struggling with the same thing. And we're going back, my eldest is 9 now, but the Fit Mum formula started when I had my second child. She's now 5. And it was with another trainer, and online training really wasn't a thing back then. I know there's lots of people are doing it now, but things like membership portals and online programs, they just weren't really around. And we said, look, there has to be something, that there is nothing for us mums out there. There's nothing for us. There's only gym classes, and you can't take your kids, and you don't always want to put your kids into the creche at the gym if they don't know them there. And we said, well, how can we get around this? Well, we're going to have something that's online accessible the whole time from home, so that mums can do it in their own time when it suits them, and that's how this is created. So yeah, in a nutshell, fitness and health has always been a part of my life, but as soon as I became a mum, I had to start thinking outside the box and how to fit all of this stuff around children, or it just wasn't going to happen.
And that probably rolls well into my first question to you. Do you think, in essence, that the fitness industry kind of, not sugarcoats it, but kind of tries to tie nutrition into this one box? Obviously, most people would know of meal prepping. Do you think it's okay? It's not for everybody, and myself included. I can do it for a couple of days, but kind of getting somebody, not just parents, but people that are not so, you could almost call it regimented, to be able to follow that task. Would following something along what is realistic be more sensible?
Do you know what? From a physiological point of view, it's all quite simple, really. We all need to eat the correct amount of calories for our personal needs, whatever that is. We all need to get all the micronutrients and macronutrients that we need. So we need the right amounts of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and all your vitamins and minerals. And that's it, really. How you achieve that is very much going to be dependent on the individual. Obviously, if you are a single male who lives alone, or female even, who lives alone, has a job that is pretty regular hours, not too insociable hours, and you don't go out to eat a lot, then you can do whatever you want, you know. But most people have some kind of restriction on their life, whether it's they've got other people that they're making meals for, whether they've got perhaps they've got food allergies, or they don't eat certain foods or certain ways due to cultural or religious restrictions. You know, there's so many things that influence how we're going to eat and where we're going to eat and what we're going to eat. There's absolutely no way you can dictate there's going to be one right way for everyone. And even within people who have got very similar goals and very similar life circumstances. For example, within my mum community, they're all pretty similar in that they've got a pretty similar lifestyle. Some of them have jobs, some of them don't, but they've all got children at home, usually young children. They've all got families at home and they're all really busy. Some of them absolutely love tracking their food intake with MyFitnessPal, and some can't stand it. Some spend a day on a week, in the week, usually a Sunday, they'll go out and do their shopping, and they will plan all their meals out in advance, and they know exactly from one day to the next what the family are going to be eating in the evening. Other people like to make it up as they go along. So even with people with very similar lives and similar goals, there's going to be variations just based on what people prefer. So there is no one way, and anyone who says that there is one perfect way is missing the point completely, because even if it was nutritionally perfect, it might not suit that person's lifestyle.
And you say there, Pollyanna, that there's traits between a group of individuals that like to track out and some that don't. What are kind of some of the characteristics that differentiate the two groups, or can you not generalize that to be so specific?
Um, I don't think there's any similarities in traits in that respect. I think it just comes down to some people love using technology and their phones in general. They tend to like data. They're the types of people who use, say, Google Calendars, and they use apps on their phone in general. So MyFitnessPal or similar tracker, they tend to use things like watches, like Apple Watches or Fitbits, and they love data, and they like numbers, and they like having that feedback and be able to see straight in front of them clearly what's going on, what they're eating, what they're burning, and it helps to keep them accountable, and they really like that. It's quite a simple thing to use. For other people, it really takes the enjoyment out of food. It turns food into numbers as opposed to a delicious recipe, and they find being on their phone more than a minimal amount during the day it's distracting, and they don't like being tied to their phones. And I've fallen into that camp. I hate tracking my food. I have done it in the past, but I really don't like it. So I personally I've got a very good awareness of calories and things like that anyway, just because of my job and my qualifications. But even then, I would find other ways of measuring out portions personally. But yeah, it's just personal preference. It really is. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it. You've got to go with whatever works for that person.
But Polly, obviously this is probably works well into this question, and you answered it quite nicely. But do you think you fall into that category because of your upbringing to some extent, with your father being a chef? Or do you think it's how you've kind of gone about things?
No, I think for me personally, I don't like getting too obsessed over the tiny details, because I've got a very obsessive personality. So I know that an extra or a minus 100 calories here and there is not going to make that much of a difference, and the tiny details don't matter. And for most people, you can eat pretty well just looking at a plate of food. You can like have, right, I've got this handful of this, I've got half a plate of this. That's enough nutritionally for the vast majority of people. And I prefer to have that more relaxed approach. I don't like to get too worked up and too obsessive over minute details that really don't make a difference. Obviously, I want to be as healthy as possible, but I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not looking to compete on stage in some kind of physique competition. I don't need that level of detail, and I don't need to be that precise, and nor do any of my mums. But they like using these apps, and I'm not going to take that away from them. If they really enjoy it, it's not a stress for them. It actually makes it easier for them, and they enjoy that way of doing things. I'm not going to take that away from them. It's just not for me personally.
I think I'd be similar to you. I think when I was competing at the highest level, I hated it. I think when nutritionists say, "I'll weigh this out," I couldn't be bothered. It's okay. I can see where you're coming from a performance perspective because it's one of those one percenters. But that was the last thing I wanted to do after a training session was having to weigh my food. I wanted to just get it on board as quickly as possible. And at the time at uni, people would ask me, "Oh, you are the things you are eating are quite similar." Well, I looked at it as fuel, so it's kind of going on a tangent a little bit, but it's looking at food in a different way altogether.
It comes down to goals, doesn't it? If you want to be an elite performer in some way, whether that's sporting performance and athletics, or whether it's more aesthetic, whether it's if you want to go on stage looking absolutely ripped, to when you are competing as a physique competitor, it is beyond normal physiological levels. You are pushing your body beyond what is quote unquote normal. You're going to have to be that precise in every way, both with your workouts and with your nutrition. But that's because you've set a very high standard, a very high goal, and with that comes very strict regimens. But most people don't have those sorts of goals, and therefore don't need to be quite so precise. And being pretty fit and healthy isn't that difficult, as in they say it's simple but not easy. The principles of what you need to do are really, really quite simple. If you ask anybody what a healthy meal is, what healthy eating is, and what a healthy lifestyle is, they'll be able to tell you. Can they make themselves do it? Well, that's an entirely different matter. But the actual principles of what they need to do is quite simple, really.
So this ties quite nicely into my next question for you. Do you, obviously more for the British listeners now, the likes of the shows of Eat Well for Less and the other shows elude me at this moment, but do you think they have the wrong notion towards what the show is looking to achieve when it's looking to educate people?
Yeah, I have to say I don't like the majority of TV shows that are around healthy eating because they come under all ends of the spectrum and they all dictate that their way is right. Whether it's a Netflix documentary about veganism, there was one the other night BBC about sugar and carbohydrates. You get Eat Well for Less, which is about eating cheaper food, and they've all got a specific angle that tends to be quite extreme, and they're all saying this way is the best, whereas actually there is no one way, and it's just confusing people because then they say, oh, maybe I should be eating a vegan diet, or maybe I should cut out all carbohydrates and go on a really low carb diet. Maybe I should always buy the cheapest food, or maybe the other end, maybe I should always be buying the most expensive organic food. And it's these extreme views that I take a stand against, because extreme anything isn't going to work. You don't need to, and it's not going to be right for everyone. And it just confuses people because they think, well, which direction do I turn in? Which extreme do I go to? And really, they don't need to go to any extreme. I think the Eat Well for Less one, I think their goal isn't necessarily about nutrition, is it? They're about reducing people's food bills without taking a look at the nutrition. I have seen that show a couple of times, and I don't recall any reference to actual food quality and nutrition. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're on a super tight budget, you are going to have to think a little bit about how to eat without eat well without spending so much money. But yeah, I would be, if I was on a really, really tight budget, the way I would choose to eat is probably not what they'd be doing on the show. I wouldn't necessarily go for the supermarket branded biscuits and cereal. I would just start eating really cheap but more nutritious foods. Things like dried pulses and beans and legumes that you have to soak yourself, super cheap. Whole grain rice, choosing things like a whole chicken as opposed to lean chicken breasts and cooking a whole chicken works out so much cheaper. And people say to me, they come to me saying, "Oh, you shouldn't eat these fruits aren't good unless they're organic because they've got too many pesticides." And like, do you know what? I would so much rather you ate budget carrots and blueberries than organic chocolate cake. I really would. They're just missing the wood through the trees, and they're focusing on the minute details without seeing the overall bigger picture of what really, really matters. And I don't care. In fact, I've got a challenge running in my group of like getting my mums to eat as many fruit and vegetables as possible, and they can eat frozen, tinned, fresh. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter as long as they eat them. And I would much rather they eat tons of regular budget, cheap as chips, frozen vegetables than they spent too much money on expensive, unnecessary things like superfoods that are just, they're right at the top of the iceberg. They don't need those yet. They just need to get the foundations right.
So it's going as far, really, as the wording of the show is quite misleading.
Yeah, I mean, what's the official title? Is it Eat Well for Less?
I think so.
Yeah, I would question the well, personally. I would question the well. And also, I think that some things are worth spending money on. It's all about priorities, isn't it? And yes, there are some people who are on really tight budgets and they do count every penny. I know that exists. But I've seen countless times of where people say, I can't afford all that. For example, protein. If they're trying to eat more protein, they're trying to eat more meat and fish. They're saying meat and fish is really expensive. And I go, well, yes, it is more expensive than, say, dried cereal and things like that. But there's ways to make it cheaper, as we've spoken about. But yeah, possibly you're going to have to start spending a little bit more money on better quality food. But the same token, they're going, because I've still got to go and pay the rest of my holiday off, or they're spending money on this outfit, or they've treated themselves to this, that, and the other. And I think sometimes I really do think it is a case of priorities. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go on holidays and buy themselves new clothes. But then by the same token, don't say you can't afford good food, because that's a choice you've made. And I'm not criticizing that either. You've got to make your own priorities, but you can't have it both ways.
But does it come down to the notion that in general a lot of people don't prioritize their health and well-being?
Definitely. I think the consumer culture in general has just exploded. And if you speak to our grandparents, they didn't eat out at restaurants unless it was a really special occasion. They mended their clothes. They went on camping holidays and caravan holidays, and going abroad was for really the very wealthy in the country. And these days people do that stuff all the time. They go buy new clothes all the time just because they feel like it, and they're always going out to restaurants, or they're a bit thirsty, so they'll pop into Starbucks and they'll buy an enormous coffee and a muffin and everything else, and they'll spend like £15 just on passing. That would have never happened in years gone by, and people just think that spending money on things that really aren't that necessary and essential is normal, whereas they can't afford to spend money on their health. And let's be honest, it doesn't even cost that money. You don't have to join a gym to exercise. You don't have to go to classes. Most people, even on really tight budgets, have the internet, so you can log on to YouTube and get free workouts of every different style of workout that doesn't need equipment 24 hours a day, but they choose not to. So then again, it comes down to, well, what are your priorities? Where's your motivation at? Because this isn't really about money, is it? This isn't really about not having the resources or the finances to be healthy. This is about your choices. And that's something where we as professionals, it's no longer about information because all the information is out there at people's fingertips. I think where our job now is to motivate people to do the things that they know they need to do, because that's the step that they're struggling with.
But how would you go about it? Because everybody's wired slightly differently.
How would you go about motivating people?
Because some people, what was the question a question I was asked this week was obviously to do with the temperature we're having at the moment. How can I motivate myself to train? Well, I kind of went to the logical sense. Well, you've got two choices. You can train earlier in the morning or later at night. But it was, it's motivation to do that. Well, it's not really, I wouldn't say that was motivation. I would say it maybe time constraint to some extent.
I'd say that's problem solving, and that's actually something that I really enjoy, I really thrive at. I love trying to come up with solutions to problems. So, yes, you do come across people who are just so resistant to change, and they'll come up with every excuse under the sun. And whatever you say to them, they'll come back with an answer telling you why they can't do it. And sometimes as a trainer, you have to step back and go, do you know what? This person isn't ready. I can't help everybody, and I am much better off putting my time and energy into people who really are prepared to change and to listen and to be inspired. That being said, motivating people is a skill in itself. There's a great book if anyone wants to learn more. It's called Motivational Interviewing. But in general, motivating people and inspiring people cannot be underestimated, because you as a trainer these days, where people don't need information anymore, what you need to do is learn how to push people's buttons. And there are some things that are going to work for lots of people, and other times you just have to get a conversation going and know when you'll know when you've pushed their button, because they'll suddenly be really enthusiastic and think, right, yes, I can do this. If you tell somebody they need to get up at 5:30 in the morning so that they can work out at 6 a.m. before they go to work, if they're not a morning person, they're going to switch off immediately. They're going to hate you for that, and they're not going to do it, and they probably won't listen to anything else you say either from there on. They'll just switch off. Whereas if you engage with them and ask them questions, rather than telling them what to do, ask them and say, right, when do you feel most energetic? When do you think you've got half an hour in your day? When would be a good time in your diary to do this? And they'll come back and tell you when will be good for them. And you go, and they've come up with that idea. You haven't told them, they've thought of it, and you're right. So you confirm it to them. You say, right, so you're telling me you will be best working out as soon as you get home from work, before you get on with the evening, before you start cooking the evening meal, helping kids with homework. You just get it over and done with the moment you step in the door, and they go, yes. And you go, right, I want you to put that in your diary, and that is now like a dentist appointment, because people don't miss their dentist appointments, right? They'll go because it's in the diary and they just turn up. So if you did that the same with your workout, whenever it is, you've set that time aside. Nothing else is going to happen in that time because you've set that time aside. The phone rings, people come to the door, whatever happens, emails start pinging in, the kids want something, but no, you've got that appointment in your diary and you've got to stick to it, and everything else can wait. You're not asking for very much time. It could be as little as 10 minutes if you have an effective workout, but it's just prioritizing it and getting it to fit into a way that works in their life, whatever works for them. So I think you really have to go with them. Some people just, they've got their own preferences. It's the same with food as well. You can't tell somebody you've got to eat this food because it's really good for you. If they can't stand it, they're not going to eat it. So you've got to think, right, you don't like that, what's an alternative? You know, and there's always an alternative. There's always a solution to every single problem. It's just finding it. I mean, I've had people come to me with injuries, so they can't do certain exercises or certain types of exercises. For example, they can't do anything that involves high impact. So that means everything like jogging, jumping, anything like that is out the window. So you've got to come up with solutions for that. Perhaps it's a dietary restriction. Maybe they are, you know, we all know in the fitness industry that most people need to eat more protein. Well, if they're a vegan, they're going to struggle with that, and they might be absolutely intent on being a vegan. That's absolutely fine, but we just need to get around that and figure out how they're going to get more protein in as a vegan. I don't believe in problems. I just believe in solutions. And what those solutions are going to be individual to that person, but there is always an answer. And as long as they can see that there's a solution to their problem, then they'll have faith not only in you, but in themselves as well, because suddenly they're not just seeing a load of problems stopping them do what they want to do and reach their goals. They're now seeing answers and potential realistic solutions to them.
I think I've got a great story to go along with like you said, with food that people don't like. I had a client first start off with me, and I had a sheet for a shopping list, and he was actually in the supermarket sending me a message. Oh, I see that there's fish on the shopping list you've given me. I don't like it, but I'm going to put it in my basket anyway. But then I thought, well, you don't like it. There is other there is other sources of protein that you can have, and there's obviously supplementary things you can have, like fish oil tablets, to solve that possible problem as well. So I was like, you don't have to, and what's the word that's eluding me, put yourself through struggles of eating something you don't like for the sake of it. So I was like, well, don't eat it if it's going to make you hate it and you don't like it. But they kind of tried different types of fish and actually started to enjoy it. So I think opening it up slightly to maybe challenge themselves, probably maybe a stronger word, but they were overcome possibly a fear that they didn't like it or they've had bad experience with it. But I was kind of like you were saying, problem solving. Well, if you don't like it, just because it's on a list doesn't mean you need to eat it.
And sometimes you're right. Sometimes they do need to push themselves out of their comfort zone. I mean, you have to sometimes, in maybe not so many words, but tell people to grow up a little bit. If they're saying I don't eat fruit and vegetables, they'll say, I'm sorry, you're an adult, grow up. Learn to like them. Sometimes some things in life have to be done. You can't not eat any fruit and vegetables. I once had a lady come to me who was really concerned. She had the same goals as everyone else. She was a mum who wanted to lose weight, tone up, get healthier. She was such a fussy eater, and I mean, she is the fussiest adult eater I've ever seen. It was a bit of a bizarre list of foods, but I said, look, we can do this. We're going to start slowly, and we're going to work with this. And her list of foods was about 10 different foods. Literally, it was something like cheese sandwiches. I think there was beetroot. I think there was something random like melon, and she would eat chicken, and this was basically it. So I had this list of about 10 foods, and we spent half an hour on Skype going through and creating a week's worth of meals that were fairly varied and, and got everything she needed, and that she got enough of fruit and vegetables, albeit repeating the same ones, for an entire week, only using the foods she would eat. I thought, right, at some point it would be great if she can expand this, but for now, if we can just get her eating better proportionately, using the foods that she's comfortable with, she will feel comfortable with the plan. I will earn her trust, and we'll start making inroads into her health. So you've got to start where people are at. But I do encourage people to try different recipes, because sometimes, especially if they don't know how to cook, they're not that great at making recipes. Sometimes it's just that they haven't found a way of cooking a particular food that they enjoy, and that's where community can come in really well. And they can reach out to people in Facebook groups and say, look, I really don't like this food. Has anyone got some good ways of preparing it, some nice recipes that I could try? And people will come back with some great recipes. I've done it myself because I've got foods I don't like. And I said, look, husband's gone and bought a load of this stuff that wasn't on the shopping list. I don't like it. I don't want to throw it away. Hit me up with your best ideas. And I go away and try them. I might not like them. I might, but you never know until you try. But the other thing I've done, because I found this has come up time and time again, I get asked the same questions. I don't like that. What should I eat instead? I have created cheat sheets for things like that. So in one of my plans in particular, there is a food swaps sheet. So it's got all the different lean proteins, all the different slightly fattier proteins, all the carbohydrates, and all things like the dairy products and the vegetables. And so basically it's a list. So if they don't like something in a recipe or in a meal plan, they just have to refer to that cheat sheet and go, right, what's sort of similar that I do like that I could have instead? Or it could be because they're allergic to something. What could they have instead so that they still get everything they need? For example, if it was something that was protein and fat, let's say it's some salmon or sardines, some oily fish, and they really don't like oily fish. Well, as you say, they can take fish oils for the omega-3s, and then they can get proteins and fats together with, say, something like some lean chicken and avocado. There you're still getting the proteins and the fats, just in a different way to the oily fish, if that's not what they like. Then they can take some omega-3 oils, and now they're pretty much getting what they need in the same way, but with foods that they like. So because that was a repeat problem that kept coming up, I came up with a solution for it so that people didn't have to keep coming to me saying, what can I have instead of that? I don't like that, don't like that, don't like that. And to be honest, I got tired of answering those questions all the time. I thought, well, if I create this cheat sheet, it's a lot easier for me able to answer the question, and also they'll have the same answers to all the times they're going to ask me the same question in future for all the other foods they don't like as well.
But Pollyanna, that's quite an interesting one in terms of what is kind of I know it's going to differentiate from people to people in terms of why they come about to disliking food. But for you personally, what was kind of the underlying? What are some of the underlying factors for you as to why you don't like foods?
Well, I don't like
Mm.
foods. I guess, I mean, there aren't very many, to be honest, because I'm lucky enough to have a very broad foodie upbringing. With a chef as a father, we always had quite grown up foods, quite sophisticated meals, real home cooked stuff. So there are very, very few things that I don't like. But I don't like, what did he buy the other day? Chicory. It's a really random one. I don't like chicory. I don't like raw celery. I like it in, like, cooked in a stew. I don't like raw celery. So, there's very few things, but they're never big enough things that it means I was nutritionally deficient. There's always a replacement. So it's rarely a big deal if somebody doesn't like something. It really isn't a big deal. There's always something else you can have. And as I say, if it's a major mental hurdle, like they just don't like fruit and vegetables, some things do have to be overcome. But that's extreme. Most people aren't that fussy. There's always going to be something. You go to McDonald's, you can eat better or worse than McDonald's. McDonald's have a grilled chicken salad. If you're insisting on going out and eating fast food, there's still better choices you can make, even there. You can choose a Diet Coke instead of a full sugar Coke. It's little changes that really, really do add up. I could go anywhere in the world and eat well. Absolutely anywhere in the world. I'm going to a wedding this weekend. It's a buffet, so I don't know the exact menu, but it will be a typical buffet. It'll be sandwiches, it'll be quiche, pizza, stuff like that. And I know that I will be able to make choices. I don't have to look at that and go, oh, well, I may as well not bother then. I may as well just eat everything in sight because there's nothing perfect here. Rather than looking at how can I be perfect, I'll go, well, how can I make the best of what is at my disposal here? What can I do? What can I have that's better? That's not to say I don't allow myself treats, but I do like feeling good. I like feeling healthy. I don't like feeling sluggish and bloated and tired and groggy. I like having energy, and that does mean eating well. So even when there's an abundance of treat foods available, I'm not inclined to eat them till I feel sick because I don't want to feel bad. I want to feel healthy.
So would you agree that you're kind of more leaning towards kind of an 80-20 approach towards people's nutrition?
Definitely, always. There's no such thing as perfect. If you try and be perfect, you will fail. And even if you were able to be perfect all the time, I mean, you've got to get some perspective. Life is for having fun as well. Um, So, I mean, I think where people go wrong with 80/20 and moderation is what they perceive as moderation isn't really. Like, they'll see moderation is, right, I'm going to have one large glass of wine every night, and I'm going to have one chocolate bar every day. But I don't know, that's on top of other things that maybe aren't optimal, and you got to do, if it works for them, great. But sometimes I see what people say is, oh, that they'll come back and they say, oh, I had this, that, and the other that wasn't healthy, but well, everything in moderation. Like, okay, but your moderation clearly isn't working for you, because you're still 2 stone overweight. You're still feeling pretty tired. You don't have the energy you need. So maybe you need to reevaluate what moderation actually means, and is what you're doing moderation, or is it actually a bit too much of the less healthy foods and not enough of the good stuff? You don't have to cut out the unhealthy foods completely, but we just need to readdress the balance.
Well, also, Pollyanna, you probably agree with this a little bit. It's substituting the likes of, you brought up earlier, with, say, going to Starbucks, Costa, you name it, whatever coffee shop you can think of under the sun, and replacing that with, say, the likes of, well, the better choice would be water, but a liquid in somewhere closer to that.
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to, I think people go into autopilot, because when you really delve deep and you ask them questions, you go, right, which has more calories in? What's better for you? What's more nutritious? What's going to be more helpful when you're, for example, trying to lose weight? Is it the Frappuccino and the muffin? And they'll tell you, oh, no, it's not, is it? But they're so on autopilot when they go in there. They'll get their lattes, their cappuccinos, their hot chocolates. They'll get a piece of cake while they're in there as well. And it's just because that's what they do, because that's like the Starbucks culture. Whereas if we can go, look, I love Starbucks, okay? I absolutely love Starbucks. And it's my truth. I don't often go, mostly because I don't get a chance. I'm not generally out and about in towns, but whenever, for example, I'm up in London working, I'll always dip into Starbucks. And what I like is an Americano with their sugar-free syrups, because that to me tastes a little bit like a treat, but yeah, it's very low calorie. And it's just showing people that you don't have to do the default of what you've always done. You know, there's ways of feeling like you're having a treat without completely steering away from what's going to help you reach your goals.
And my final question for you, Pollyanna, before we wrap up the episode. If you had to summarize what we've been speaking about today into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
One sentence. Okay. Have a really good look at what you're doing and what you know you've got to be doing, and evaluate whether you're actually making the correct choices, because most people know what it is they've got to be doing. They're just not doing it. So try and think like the expert. Stop coming to experts like us. That sounds like a crazy thing to say, but you know the answers. You know what you've got to eat. You know what you've got to do. So go and do it.
So once again, Pollyanna, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Game podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been good fun.
It's been my pleasure. And before I forget, I would really appreciate it if you would be so kind as to leave a short written review, as it helps to get the podcast more notoriety, and it would be more visible in future to others, and thus helping more people, which my guests and I are all about. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Mindset Game podcast.